We're going to be working on a new PC build to replace my tired old i7 build. This is a workstation, not a gaming machine. And now that I'm doing some 4K video editing, I ran into some issues. So I'll kind of take you over the specs a little bit. So here we have an Intel i7-6700K running at 4 gigahertz, 64 gigabytes of Corsair VENGEANCE RAM. I have an all-in-one Corsair cooler and a NVIDIA 760 video card. Again, this is not a gaming machine. For storage, I'm using a Samsung 960 EVO 512 gigabyte drive because I only use it for the OS, and then my storage drives are here, which are two 6 terabyte Western Digital black spinning drives. Let's go over the specs of this new build. First off, starting with the motherboard, I decided to go with Asus ROG Maximus 11 Hero because it has an Intel Z390 chipset, and this was the best motherboard that I can get before I got into the Intel i9X series motherboards. It has a capability of DDR4 at 4400 megahertz with a max of 64 gigabytes, and it has two M2 SATA slots at 6 gigabytes per second. For the processor, we went with the Intel i9-9900k at 5 gigahertz. Didn't feel the need to go to the X series, and this was the best performance for value that we found. It still has the LGA 1151 socket, 8 cores, and it is a 9th gen processor. To keep this cool, we decided to go with the Corsair H150i Pro. This is a 360 millimeter radiator with 3 120 millimeter fans. It is RGB, more on that later. For RAM, the last build had 64 gigabytes of VENGEANCE Corsair memory. With this build, we decided to go with G-Skill Trident, also 64 gigabytes at 3200 megahertz. It's not the fastest RAM, but at 64 gigabytes, it should be decent. Part of the reason why we got this G-Skill Trident RAM was because it has addressable RGB for those extra megahertz. For the graphics card, this is not a gaming machine, this is a workstation. So we decided not to go with top of the line on the graphics card. We decided to go with the Asus RTX 2080. This is the 8 gigabyte version. So we should still be able to do gaming, but this is not the main purpose of this machine. For storage, we're not going with one, but two Samsung 970 Pro at 1 terabyte PCIe hard drives. They're both NVMe, and we're actually going to be transferring both of the Western Digital black 6 terabyte drives from the previous machine into this one. To put it all together, we decided to go with the ThermalTake 71TG case. This case is tempered glass. That's what the TG stands for. So it has 4 tempered glass panels. It swings out and is able to display all the RGB goodness. The peripherals, we went with the Razer Chroma Black Widow. For the keyboard, it's a mechanical keyboard. For the mouse, we went with the Logitech G900. It's not a gaming mouse, it's a wireless mouse, but it's a very comfortable mouse. For the mouse pad, we went with the Razer Firefly RGB. And I think eventually I'll be switching out that mouse for a Razer Mamba just to keep the RGB compatibility all within the same ecosystem. For the monitor, we're actually using a triple monitor setup with this. And we're running Dell U2415Bs. Their IPS panel is 24 inches. They have a very, very slim bezel, so you can actually run them next to each other, and they almost look seamless. For this build and for the test setup, we're actually going to be using an ultra sharp 38-inch, we're going to use an ultra wide 38-inch Dell, which is a U3818DW. This monitor is not a gaming monitor, it's a workstation monitor. It has a 8 millisecond response time, which by today's standards is actually very slow, but it looks really, really nice. So let's get this build going.
The first thing you want to do is unbox your case and find a suitable working area. You want to stay away from carpeted areas to prevent static electricity from damaging any of your components. In this case, we chose a kitchen island because it gives us a large workbench and it has flooring. The next step is to unbox your motherboard. Set the motherboard on a soft surface, such as the top of the box it came in, to prevent any damage. Remove the screws on the PCI SATA slots to install the drive. Do this for both drives. Install them and replace the heat sinks. To install the RAM, insert one side first and press firmly until it snaps into place. Repeat for all 4 slots. If you only have 2 sticks of RAM, use the same color channel. Turn your board upside down to install the water cooler's backplate. Make sure you use the correct one, whether you're using AMD or an Intel processor. This is a rectangle, so make sure that the slots line up. Now the crown jewel. Unbox your processor carefully. Be very careful when installing the processor, as you could damage it. Look for the small triangle on one of the corners and line it up with the triangle on your motherboard. Open up the lid and set your processor down carefully. Once the processor has been placed in the socket, close the lid and carefully close down the latch. Prepare the case to install its components by removing all 4 glass panels and place them somewhere where they will not be damaged. In this case, we use the couch. In order to make space and to make installation easier and to install the radiator, we then remove the 3.5-inch hard drive base and the vertical GPU mount.
For the case fans, we're actually going to be replacing the one 140mm fan in the front for 3 120mm fans. These are Corsair's RGB series. It comes with a controller, and using Corsair's iQ Sync software, we will be able to sync the cooler RGB with the fan RGB.
To replace the fan, remove the front panel that's secured by 4 clips on the inside. Remove the 4 screws holding the fan in place and install the new fans. Make sure to look at the airflow errors on the fan housing so that they're pulling fresh air into your case. Also, be mindful of the orientation of the fan cables. You want to orient them in a way that will make them both easy to plug into your motherboard and controller, but also that you can hide the cables easily. To power the machine, we're using EVGA Supernova 1000 T2 power supply. It is rated 80+ titanium, which means it runs at 95% efficiency 95% of the time. Unbox the power supply and take out all the modular cables that came with it. This case has a bottom-mounted PSU. I'm installing it so it pulls fresh air in from the bottom of the case and expels it through the back. Place the case on its side to install the motherboard. Align it with its mounting screws on the case and install the 9 screws that came with it. This particular motherboard has a built-in I/O panel, so I don't have to worry about it. Connect the power cable from the power supply to the motherboard and use the grommets to hide the cable through the back of the case for a nicer presentation. Remove the additional 2 3.5-inch drive caddies to install the radiator. Sandwich the radiator in between the case and the fans, and also make sure that the fans are oriented to pull fresh air in. Remove the protective cover from the CPU block. Clean off the existing heatsink grease and install a pea-sized drop in the processor. Proceed to install the water block on your processor. Be careful not to over-tighten the screws, as they are known to break off. Continue to install your case's I/O cables, water cooler, fan power, SATA cables, SATA power, and fan cables. Again, use the grommets through the back for a clean look. This is the ThermalTake View after all. Finally, we're installing the vertical GPU bracket for RTX 2080. Run your riser cable first in order to have more room. Then, mount the video card in the bracket. Replace the screws to secure it in place. Then, run and install both power cables for the graphics card. Use Velcro and zip ties to manage the cables in the back for that clean look we've been after. Configure the BIOS to boot from removable media to install the operating system, in this case Windows 10. Download and install all of your hardware drivers and utilities. Sit back and enjoy the finished product.